The silent intruder, Emily, sat at her desk, tapping her pencil against the edge as she stared at the clock. Just a few more minutes, and the school day would finally be over. She was already thinking about the snack she'd grab when she got home. Maybe some chips and a soda while watching her favorite show. The classroom buzzed with quiet whispers and the rustling of papers as students packed up their things early, eager to leave. Then, the intercom crackled to life. The entire class went silent as the principal's voice filled the room. "This is a lockdown. Please remain silent and follow procedures." For a second, nobody moved. Lockdowns were nothing new. The school had drills all the time. But there was something in the principal's voice, something tense, something real, that made Emily's stomach tighten. Her teacher, Ms. Carter, didn't hesitate. She rushed to the door, locking it and turning off the lights. "Everyone, to the corner. Now," she whispered. The students obeyed without question. They scrambled to the back of the room, crouching behind desks and bookshelves. Emily felt her heart pound as she squeezed into a small space between her friend Lily and a bookshelf. Minutes passed. At first, it was easy to believe it was just another drill. But then the minutes stretched longer, and a strange feeling crept over them. Something wasn't right. Emily hugged her knees to her chest, her breath shallow. No one spoke. The only sound was the occasional shuffling of someone adjusting their position. The air felt thick, heavy with unease. Then, from the hallway, footsteps echoed. Slow, measured. The sound sent a chill down Emily's spine. It wasn't the hurried steps of a teacher checking rooms or a student running late. These footsteps were slow, deliberate, like someone was listening, waiting. A shadow passed the small window of the classroom door. Someone was standing just outside. Emily felt Lily grab her wrist, squeezing it tightly. They both held their breath. The door handle rattled. The whole class froze. Someone was testing the lock, trying to get in. A low, heavy breathing sound followed. It was close. Too close. Emily could hear her heartbeat in her ears. She squeezed her eyes shut, praying the person would move on. The rattling stopped. The footsteps continued down the hall, moving from door to door. Then came a new sound, faint but unmistakable. Someone crying. It was distant, maybe from another classroom or somewhere else in the building. The sound was weak, muffled, like whoever was crying was trying to stay silent but couldn't help it. Emily felt tears sting her own eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She had never felt fear like this before. Real, crushing fear that made it hard to breathe. Time lost meaning. Minutes felt like hours. The footsteps continued, then stopped. Silence stretched over the school, thick and suffocating. Then, finally, a new sound. Sirens. They started faint, far away, but quickly grew louder. The flashing red and blue lights from police cars flickered through the cracks of the blinds. A voice came over the intercom. "Stay put. Do not open the doors." Relief washed over Emily in a cold wave, but she knew it wasn't over yet. The intruder was still inside. Later, they would learn the truth. A man had entered the school hours earlier, hiding in a bathroom, waiting for the right moment. He had a weapon, but he never got into any classrooms. The locked doors had kept him out. When the police finally gave the all clear, Emily and her classmates slowly stood, stretching their stiff limbs. Some students were crying. Others were shaking. Ms. Carter's voice was calm, but her hands trembled as she unlocked the door. As they walked out of the classroom, escorted by officers, Emily glanced down the hallway. The empty corridor looked the same as always, but she knew she'd never see it the same way again. Even now, she refuses to walk that hallway alone. The Vanishing Girl, it started as a normal day. Students filled the cafeteria, chatting, laughing, and eating their lunch. The noise of hundreds of conversations echoed through the large room. Trays clattered, and the smell of pizza and fries lingered in the air. Chloe sat with her friends, laughing at a joke someone had just told. Everything seemed normal. Then, the speakers crackled to life. A voice came through, tense and urgent. Attention, students and staff. This is a lockdown. Please follow lockdown procedures immediately. The room erupted in panic. Students screamed, chairs scraped against the floor, and people ran in different directions. Some dived under tables. Others rushed towards the nearest exit. Teachers shouted, trying to calm everyone down. Stay quiet. Get down. Lock the doors. The cafeteria doors slammed shut as staff members locked them. In the chaos, Chloe stood up quickly. Her heart pounded. She needed to get out of the open cafeteria. Without thinking, she sprinted towards the bathroom at the end of the hall. It was the closest place she could think of where she could hide. Her friends barely had time to see her run before they ducked under the table. Inside the bathroom, Chloe locked herself in a stall. She tried to control her breathing. Her hands shook as she held onto the phone in her pocket. Minutes passed. She could hear faint sounds from the hallway. Footsteps, shuffling, and then silence. The lockdown lasted for nearly an hour. Inside the cafeteria, students stayed hidden, whispering to each other, wondering what was happening. When the lockdown was finally lifted, a voice announced over the intercom, "All clear. Teachers, please account for your students." One by one, students got up from their hiding places. People sighed in relief, hugging each other, glad that whatever danger there was, it was now over. But something was wrong. Chloe's friends looked around, expecting to see her return from the bathroom. But she didn't. "Where's Chloe?" one of them asked, looking toward the bathroom hallway. "She went to the bathroom before the lockdown," another said. "She should be back by now." Confused, her friends waited. But Chloe never came back. The teachers noticed her absence when they did a head count. "Has anyone seen Chloe Henderson?" her homeroom teacher asked. The students glanced at each other. "She was in the bathroom," someone finally said. The teachers quickly sent staff to check. The bathroom door was unlocked. They called out her name. No answer. They stepped inside. Empty stalls. But something was wrong. Chloe's phone was on the floor near the sinks. The screen was shattered. There were no other signs of her. The school security team reviewed the cameras. They watched the footage carefully. Chloe was seen running down the hallway, entering the bathroom just before the lockdown started. But that was it. The cameras never showed her leaving. "That doesn't make sense," a teacher murmured. "Where did she go?" The search for Chloe began immediately. School staff searched every classroom, every hallway, every storage room, even the janitor's closet. They checked the exits, but all the doors had been locked during the lockdown. No one could have left the building. And yet, Chloe was gone. The police were called. Officers arrived at the school, questioning students and staff. Did anyone see her leave? Did anyone hear anything unusual? No one had answers. Days passed, then weeks. Flyers with closed face were posted all over the school, around town, at grocery stores, and on street poles. Missing. Chloe Henderson. Last seen at Fairview High School during a lockdown. Her parents pleaded on TV. If anyone knows anything, please come forward. We just want our daughter back. But no clues were found. No footprints. No fingerprints. It was like Chloe had vanished into thin air. Rumors spread through the school. Maybe she ran away, some students whispered. But those who knew Chloe disagreed. She wouldn't just leave. She had no reason to. Others believed something more sinister happened. What if someone took her? One student murmured. Maybe during the chaos of the lockdown? But that didn't make sense either. The school had been locked from the inside. No one could get in or out. And then, the stories began. One janitor claimed he heard crying coming from the bathroom late at night. He had been cleaning the hallways when he passed by. I swear, I heard soft sobbing, but when I checked, no one was there. A teacher who stayed late grading papers reported hearing footsteps in the empty hall. I thought it was another teacher, she said. But when I looked, no one was there. Students started avoiding the bathroom where Chloe was last seen. Some said they felt strange when they went inside, like they weren't alone. Others swore they saw something move in the mirrors when no one was there. Months went by, and the school tried to move on. But the mystery of Chloe's disappearance remained. Some still believed she had been kidnapped. Others thought she had somehow escaped. But then there were those who whispered another theory. What if she never left? One student whispered to a friend in the hallway. What if she's still here? Just not in the way we think. No one knew the truth. No one ever found out what happened to Chloe Henderson. But every now and then, late at night, when the halls were empty, someone would pass by the bathroom, and they would hear it. A soft, quiet sobbing from inside. The substitute secret the day started like any other at Westwood Middle School. The students shuffled into their classrooms, chatting about their weekend plans and upcoming tests. The air smelled of freshly mopped floors and cafeteria food. Teachers prepared their lessons, and everything seemed normal until Mr. Collins arrived. Nobody had heard of Mr. Collins before. He wasn't on any teacher lists, and there had been no announcements about a substitute. But when the regular teacher, Mrs. Davidson, called in sick, the school sent him to cover her English class. He was a tall man with dark hair, sharp eyes, and a smile that didn't quite reach them. He wore an old-fashioned suit, the kind people didn't wear anymore. Something about him felt off, but the students didn't question it. After all, substitutes could be strange sometimes. The first half of the class went smoothly. Mr. Collins introduced himself and wrote his name on the board in large, perfect letters. He spoke in a calm, measured voice, asking students to read aloud from their books. He didn't seem particularly strict or particularly kind. Just there. But when the intercom crackled, everything changed. Attention, all students and staff. The principal's voice rang through the speakers. This is a lockdown drill. Please follow protocol immediately. This is only a drill. Normally, lockdown drills were routine. Teachers locked doors, turned off lights, and told students to stay quiet in their hiding spots. But Mr. Collins did something different. Instead of locking the door, he walked over and left it wide open. Mr. Collins? One student, Jake, whispered. You're supposed to lock it. Mr. Collins turned to the class and put a finger to his lips. Shh, he whispered. There's no need. They're already inside. A cold chill ran through the room. A few students exchanged nervous glances. Who's inside? Emma, a girl in the front row, asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Mr. Collins only smiled. Then, The lights flickered. For a brief moment, everything went dark. When they turned back on, the door was shut, but nobody had seen him move. "Okay, this isn't funny," Jake said, standing up. "Lockdowns are serious. We have to follow the rules." "Rules?" Mr. Collins chuckled, shaking his head. "Rules are meant to keep you safe. But what happens when safety is an illusion?" Nobody knew what to say. The room was completely silent, except for the faint hum of the ceiling lights. Then, outside the door, footsteps echoed in the hallway. Slow, deliberate steps. Heavy breathing. The door handle rattled. Panic spread through the class. A few students backed away from the door, their eyes wide with fear. "Is this part of the drill?" someone asked. Mr. Collins just watched with an amused expression. Then, suddenly, someone banged on the door. Hard. Several students screamed. "Mr. Collins, do something," Emma shouted. He tilted his head. "Why?" he asked. "You should open it. See what happens." Jake ran to the door and tried to pull it open, but it wouldn't budge. "It's locked," he gasped. From the outside, more banging. The door shook violently, as if something on the other side was desperate to get in. The sound sent waves of terror through the class. Students huddled together, whispering prayers, clenching their fists. Then, just as suddenly as it started, the noise stopped. Silence filled the air. Nobody dared to move. Mr. Collins let out a soft chuckle. "Interesting," he murmured, as if he had been conducting some sort of experiment. "It seems they've moved on." "Who?" Emma demanded, tears in her eyes. "Who moved on?" "The ones who were here before," he replied simply. The students exchanged horrified looks. This was no ordinary lockdown drill. Jake turned to the security camera in the corner of the classroom. "They'll see this. The office is watching the cameras, right?" Mr. Collins followed his gaze. "Oh, those?" They stopped working the moment the lights flickered. He grinned. "It's just us now." Panic turned into full-blown terror. Students rushed to the windows, but they wouldn't open. Some banged on the walls, screaming for help. No one answered. "Why are you doing this?" Jake asked, his voice shaking. Mr. Collins took a step forward. "I never said I was doing anything." The intercom crackled again. But this time, the voice was distorted. It wasn't the principal. It wasn't even human. "They're here," the voice whispered. "They're always here." Then, the room went pitch black. The students screamed. When the lights flickered back on, Mr. Collins was gone. The door, which had been locked moments ago, now swung open. A single note was written on the chalkboard in perfect, looping letters. "I'll be back." The police arrived moments later. They found the students shaken and terrified. Security footage was checked, but there was nothing. No record of Mr. Collins entering the school. No files on him existed in the system. The substitute teacher had simply appeared and vanished. The school never spoke of it again. But every year, on the same day, during the same class period, the lights flickered. And sometimes, just for a moment, students swore they could hear his voice whispering, "They're already inside." The knock at the window. Lena had never liked staying late at school. The long, empty hallways and dark corners always made her uneasy. But tonight, she had no choice. She and a few friends were in the library for an evening tutoring session, trying to prepare for their upcoming exams. The school was located in a small town, surrounded by thick woods. During the day, it looked peaceful, but at night, it felt isolated. Too quiet. too dark. The fluorescent lights in the library flickered slightly as Lena sat at a long wooden table, flipping through her textbook. Beside her, her best friend, Mia, sighed loudly. I don't think my brain can handle any more math, she said, rubbing her temples. Across from them, Jake and Oliver, two other classmates, were chatting in hushed voices, clearly just as bored. Then the announcement came. The school's intercom crackled to life, and a tense voice echoed through the speakers. Attention! The school is now in lockdown. Please follow emergency procedures immediately. This is not a drill. Everyone froze. Lena's heart started pounding. A lockdown? At night? That had never happened before. Mia's eyes widened, and she quickly looked toward the librarian, Mrs. Thompson, who had already rushed to lock the doors. Everyone stay quiet, she whispered, her voice calm but urgent. Away from the windows. Hide now. Lena and her friends didn't need to be told twice. They scrambled toward the back of the library, ducking behind bookshelves and under tables. The library lights were dimmed, making the space feel even eerier. For a few minutes, there was only silence. The only sound was the soft rustling of pages as someone accidentally brushed against a book. Lena held her breath, listening hard. Outside, the wind howled, rustling the trees that surrounded the school. Then came the knocking. It started softly, a gentle tap on the large window near the librarian's desk. Tap, tap, tap. At first, Lena thought it was just the wind pushing against the glass. But then the tapping grew louder, rhythmic, intentional. Knock, knock, knock. Lena exchanged a nervous glance with Mia. That didn't sound like the wind. Someone was outside. Someone, or something, was knocking. Jake, who was crouched near a bookshelf, whispered, Did you hear that? Oliver nodded. It's coming from the window. Mrs. Thompson motioned for everyone to stay still. Her face was pale, her eyes locked on the dark glass. The library had large windows facing the school's backyard, which led into the woods. At night, those windows reflected the inside of the library like a mirror, making it hard to see outside. But then, something moved. A shadow passed across the glass. Lena's breath caught in her throat. It was a figure, tall, too tall to be a normal person. Its limbs looked stretched, unnaturally long. It stood just outside the window, unmoving. Then the knocking turned into pounding. Bang, bang, bang. The sound echoed through the silent library, making some of the students gasp. Books fell from shelves as the glass shuddered. Something heavy pressed against the window. The figure outside wasn't just knocking anymore. It was trying to get in. Lena clamped a hand over her mouth to keep from screaming. Mia grabbed her arm, squeezing tightly. Jake and Oliver crouched lower, their faces frozen in fear. Then, as suddenly as it started, the pounding stopped. Silence filled the room once more. No one dared to move. The only sound was the distant hum of the school's ventilation system. Mrs. Thompson, still by the door, took a shaky breath. She pulled out her phone and tried to dial for help, but there was no signal. The school's thick walls always made reception bad, but now it was completely gone. Minutes passed. Then, a soft sound returned. Scratch, scratch, scratch. A slow, dragging noise against the glass. Lena squeezed her eyes shut. She didn't want to look, but she couldn't help herself. She turned her head slightly and peered at the window. The figure was still there, but now it was closer. Its face was pressed against the glass, but the features were blurred, like a smudged painting. No eyes, no mouth, just a distorted shape where a face should be. It stood so still, except for one long, bony hand, which slowly dragged its fingers down the window. Scratch, scratch. A sudden loud noise made Lena jump. A door slammed somewhere in the school. Footsteps echoed in the hallway outside. But they weren't normal footsteps. They were uneven, almost dragging. Mrs. Thompson looked terrified but remained calm. "Stay hidden," she whispered. "Don't move. Don't make a sound." The footsteps came closer. Then they stopped, right outside the library door. For what felt like forever, nothing happened. No one dared to breathe. The air felt thick, heavy with tension. Then, slowly, the doorknob began to turn. Mia let out a tiny whimper, barely audible, but Lena heard it. They all did. The doorknob rattled again, harder this time. It was locked, but would it hold? Then, silence. The presence outside the door didn't move. The figure outside the window was gone. Seconds stretched into minutes. No one knew what to do. They just waited, hoping, praying that whatever was out there would leave. Then, without warning, the school alarm blared. The emergency siren echoed through the building. Red lights flashed as the sound of police sirens grew closer. Someone had called for help. Mrs. Thompson let out a relieved sigh. "Stay here," she whispered. "Help is coming." The footsteps outside the door retreated. The eerie presence was gone. When the police arrived, they searched the entire school. They found no sign of anyone, no intruder, no sign of forced entry. But when they checked the security cameras, they saw something strange. A figure stood outside the library window. Tall, thin, its face blurred, unreadable. It stayed there for several minutes before vanishing into the woods. No one knew who or what it was. The lockdown was lifted, but Lena and her friends never forgot that night. The library never felt the same again. And sometimes, late at night, when the wind blew just right, they swore they could still hear it. Tap, tap, tap. The last text message, it was supposed to be just another Friday night. The high school football game was the highlight of the week. The crowd cheered, the band played, and the players ran across the field, giving their best. Parents sat in the bleachers, watching their kids, while students gathered in groups, chatting and laughing. It was a night filled with energy, excitement, and school spirit. Hannah and her friends weren't really interested in football, but they still went to the game. It was a tradition, and besides, the whole town showed up. The game was more about hanging out, eating nachos, and talking about school gossip than actually watching what was happening on the field. The air was crisp, the bright stadium lights shining down on the field. Hannah sat with her best friends, Olivia and Mia, enjoying the game from a distance. They were busy taking pictures, posting updates on social media, and laughing about something a classmate had said earlier that day. Then, everything changed. The lockdown announcement, the announcer's voice suddenly cut through the noise. "Attention, everyone. This is an emergency. The school is now on lockdown. Please seek shelter immediately." At first, no one moved. People looked around, confused. Then panic spread like wildfire. The players on the field stopped running. The coaches shouted for everyone to get off the field. Cheerleaders scrambled to gather their things. Parents stood up, scanning the area for their children. What's happening? Olivia asked, her voice shaking. I don't know, Mia answered, grabbing her bag. Hannah's heart pounded. She had never experienced a lockdown before. Sure, they had drills at school, but those were always planned. This felt different. This was real. A teacher came running toward them. Girls, get inside. Now. They didn't question it. The three of them ran toward the school building, following the others. Some students ran to their cars, trying to leave, but the school gates were locked. There was no way out. Everyone had to stay inside until the lockdown was over. Hiding in the locker room, the hallways were chaotic. Students pushed through the doors, looking for somewhere to hide. Some classrooms were locked. Teachers ushered students into open rooms, closing and locking the doors behind them. Where do we go? Mia asked, breathing hard. The locker room, Hannah suggested. It's close, and it locks from the inside. They sprinted down the hall, dodging other students. When they reached the locker room, several other girls were already inside, huddled together. Someone quickly shut the door behind them, locking it. The room was silent except for the sound of heavy breathing. The overhead lights buzzed faintly. No one spoke. They all knew the rules of a lockdown. Stay quiet, stay hidden, and wait for help. Minutes passed, maybe 10, maybe 20. Time felt slow. Then, something made Hannah's skin crawl. A sound. A faint, soft breathing coming from outside the locker room door. She glanced at Olivia and Mia, who had also heard it. What is that? Olivia whispered. Hannah slowly pulled out her phone and texted her mom. Something's wrong. I hear breathing outside the door. Her mom replied instantly. Stay quiet. Help is coming. Hannah's hands shook as she held her phone. The breathing outside continued. It was steady, slow, like someone was standing right there, just beyond the door. Mia squeezed Hannah's arm. What do we do? No one moved. No one spoke. Then came a quiet tap, a single knock on the locker room door. The girls froze. Hannah's heartbeat thundered in her ears. The knock came again, a little louder this time. And then, silence. The breathing had stopped. The knocking had stopped. But the fear in the room had only grown. Hannah's phone vibrated in her hand. A new message from her mom. Are you okay? She was about to reply when her screen lit up with a new notification. Another message from her mom. Hannah? Then, before she could type a response, something else appeared on the screen. Hannah barely had time to read her own words before sending them. It's inside. Her fingers trembled as she looked up. The locker room was dark, but she could still see the others. They were all there, still hiding, still afraid. Nothing had entered. Had it? The air felt heavy, thick, like something unseen was in the room with them, watching, waiting. Then, the lights flickered, just for a second, but it was enough to send a wave of fear through the girls. A loud bang came from one of the lockers. Someone let out a small scream before quickly covering their mouth. Then, before anyone could react, the lights went out completely. Total darkness. Phones lit up the room as the girls turned on their screens. Hannah's heart was racing. She checked her phone. The message to her mom was still there. It's inside. But she hadn't sent it. Had she? The vanishing seconds felt like hours. The silence in the locker room was unbearable. No one dared to speak. They just clutched their phones, staring into the darkness, hoping, praying, that whatever was in there with them wasn't real. A distant scream echoed from somewhere else in the school. Then footsteps. Slow, deliberate, moving past the door. And then, nothing. The silence stretched on. Minutes passed. Then more minutes. Eventually, the sound of sirens filled the air outside. Police. They had arrived. Someone pounded on the locker room door. "This is the police." "Open up." One of the girls scrambled to unlock the door. The second it swung open, the officers flooded in, flashlights scanning the room. It was empty. No broken locks. No signs of struggle. No forced entry. Just one thing was left behind. Hannah's phone. Lying on the floor, screen still glowing. Her last message still displayed. It's inside. Hannah was gone. Unanswered questions. No one ever figured out what happened that night. The security cameras in the hallways didn't show anything unusual. The locker room door never opened once it was locked. The windows were all sealed shut. There was no way in. And yet, Hannah had vanished. Her family searched. The police searched. The entire town joined in, combing every inch of the school and the surrounding area. Flyers were posted. News reports covered the story, but no trace of Hannah was ever found. Some say she ran away. Some believe something or someone took her. But those who were in the locker room that night, they don't believe she left on her own. They remember the breathing outside the door, the message on her phone, and the feeling in the dark. Something had been there, and it had taken Hannah with it. To this day, no one knows where she went, or if she's still out there somewhere, waiting to be found.